Welcome to Power Conversations and Connections with Susan. To say the least, I am super excited for the guests that we have here on Power Conversations. Tonight, we're talking with the one and only Darian Appleton, my daughter. Um, One of the things that was really important to me when I decided to bring guests to the show, this was a must, right? Because I wanted to talk about how our relationship has evolved, and share some of the pitfalls and how we got to this place. So, welcome to Power Conversations, Darian.
Thank you, mommy.
You could look at me. You
Okay.
loosen up. It's going to be
I'm
okay.
fine.
We have had largely a great relationship, right? But I think one of the things that has happened in my evolution, in my evolving into, my best self, what I consider to be in the best season of my life, is that would not have happened if I didn't have you in the state that we're in. And what I mean by that is, you're my daughter and you're my friend. On the journey, I had to make quite a few adjustments in order for us to get to this place. And so that's really where I want to start our conversation. The adjustments from being a daughter to becoming a friend for me was learning what I was doing right and dealing with what I was not doing right. And so, what is your take on that?
I think that from your perspective or from mine?
No, from your perspective.
From my perspective, I think that our relationship began to evolve when I also took a moment to think about some of my experiences as a child and
Mm-hmm.
see them through your lens. For instance, the me losing my dad. I always saw that as me losing my dad.
Mm-hmm.
But I never, it took me a long time to see it as you losing your husband. Me being devastated and having to move from city to city to city. I
Mm-hmm.
saw it from my perspective, but I didn't, it took me until my early 20s to really see it from what you may have been going through that took us on that path.
Mm-hmm.
So, in the same way that you did some reflection, I did some reflection and was able to see things from a different perspective, which gave me insight into your experience.
And I like that. I really like the fact that we seemed like we traveled different paths, but we were really on the same one. Because while you were doing all the introspective, trying to see it from my perspective, I was trying to see it from yours. Because after losing your dad, the thing that I always wanted, first of all, I never wanted boys at all. I always wanted a daughter. And I always wanted a daughter because one, I wanted to dress you, right? But I wanted it because there's a bond between a mother and a daughter. I spent a lot of time with my mom because one, I was the youngest. So by the time I got to a decent age, a teenage age, my sisters were gone. So it was me and my mom, and my mom showed me how to sew, and my mom did this, and those types of things. And my cousins, we all had that mother daughter thing going on. And so I always wanted a daughter. The other thing that I wanted about a daughter was the opportunity to be a friend. Because as I began to grow and mature and deal with some of the things that, my mom did or didn't do, at the end of the day, you know, she was my girl, my old head. We had a great relationship. And we had a relationship where we could actually talk and have conversations, some of them hard, right? Took me many years to do it, but some of them hard. So I always wanted a daughter that I could bond with. I felt before I started to do the work and see it through your lens that I was in jeopardy of never losing my daughter because you'll always be that. But I was in jeopardy of missing the friendship piece, right? Because I was wrapped in my own stuff. So I like the fact that you said you began to see it through the lens of my eyes, and I began to see it through the lens of yours. And that's when I started to make some of the adjustments. Um, what is one of the first things that you realized was a little different than you thought? When you say your journey, right? What was that aha moment that said, wait a minute, there is something different that I can consider here?
I can't say that it was a definite moment, but I think in my experience as um, an independent young woman in college and, traveling away for my first semester of college and then coming back and living with you for a few months before I went out on my own,
Mm-hmm.
that whole kind of process, that whole journey, allowed me to really identify specific instances where you and I would clash or
Mm-hmm.
when you and I would butt heads. And then that caused me to reflect and say, okay, if this happened in this way, why?
Mm-hmm.
What did I contribute to it? What did you contribute to it? What were the surrounding factors that made that situation what it was? And having a bunch of different opportunities for that throughout those 2 years or, year and a half gave me more insight. And just as it went on and as more scenarios happened, I was able to develop a better sense of self, which I think helped me identify with you more.
And that's, I was going to ask you, because of course, you went to school for psychology. So criminology and all of those pieces kind of woven together in those college years. Did that help you? Was there someone who kind of said, okay, let's settle down and look at these things differently, or did it just come from personal growth?
Yeah, it came from personal growth. I did have, friends that I made, friendships that I developed. I didn't necessarily have any mentors or any like older women that I confided in until I came across my therapist, but that was well after I had graduated college. So I think it came from personal growth. And I think some of the courses, I remember very vividly a course that I was taking, we were talking about like physical abuse and sexual violence. And in that moment during that lecture, I kind of like I was kind of disassociated from class and I was thinking about my own experiences and that just kind of caused me to reflect and be like, okay, well, I went through this and that was a result of that and that was connected to that. And so I just kind of got in my head about all the different experiences that I had had, including the ones that you and I had gone through together.
Mm-hmm.
So I think a lot of it came from personal growth and reflection and just kind of getting older and getting a better understanding of myself, not necessarily from one person or one instance.
And I think the one of the biggest things that you said was self, right? I remember a distinct moment. I remember standing on the patio. You and I had clashed, um, and we didn't have constant clashing. Like, it just wasn't, what we did. We didn't do the terrible teens and all of that stuff. And I think maybe not having the constant clashes made when we did clash even more intense, right? But I remember standing out on the patio, and I remember thinking, I'm going to not have my daughter as a friend. I remember that so clearly. And the Holy Spirit said to me, everything that you put in her will come out. So you've got to sow what you want to see. And I remember that. And so I began to think about what I did at work, being in leadership, being a communicator, leading teams, and literally having soft skills as, a foundation for my career and using that to excel. And in that moment, I thought, you know how to do this. You do this every day at work. You do this with people that you work with. You do it with the people that you train. You can transfer this home so that you can have a better connection with your daughter. And for me, I began to take those literal lessons that I was creating and my team was creating, and I became intentional about applying them at home. The biggest thing for me was listening and changing my responses to you. So, in other words, instead of saying what you need to do this, or you need to do that, I would say, I encourage you, I encourage you to do this. And for me, that was kind of a way to kind of soften my stance and realize that I had put some good stuff in you. You know what I mean? That 99.9% of what we had gone through had put good stuff in you. Of course, I think the other thing is during those moments, we began to deal with how we felt about your dad's death. And I don't think that we ever did. And as I matured and as you became older, I was like, okay, now that I'm softening up, everything doesn't have to be so, like this all the time. Let's start to have some decent conversation about how we really feel about stuff, that and other stuff. And that was an aha moment for me on the patio. You had moved out, and I just remember, if you don't get it together, you're going to lose the ability to have her as a friend. So I never shared that with you. But I think that that was one of the key moments. As a matter of fact, I know that was one of the key moments for me. So fast forward, right? Um, we moved because I always traveled with my job, right? And then we get into a situation and we go to Houston. We decide that we're coming back to Florida. And I think things began to really click for us in our relationship because we had to bond and had to get together and come together and have those conversations because for those few moments, for those few months, we was living with someone else. And I thought we were all we had. So what was your stance on that time when we came back to Florida and decided, okay, we're going to start this thing over in terms of our life?
My experience of coming back to Florida was different because that was my senior year of high school and that was my third high school that I had gone to.
Mm-hmm.
And I had developed such great relationships with my friends in Houston, who I'd known a few months before we got super close. And I had kind of envisioned myself, finishing high school with them and being able to experience all the senior activities with them. And so moving back to Florida, after building those great relationships was very hard for me.
Mm-hmm.
And I integrated into my new school pretty well. I found friends and I got a boyfriend. So things were moving smoothly. But emotionally, I don't think I had really settled in the fact that like I was going to be the new girl again and everything was going to kind of be like fresh and new.
Mm-hmm.
On top of the fact that we were living with someone.
Right.
And so I had a lot of emotions and a lot that I had not dealt with. And then I had some kind of tumultuous experiences during my senior year that put me further down that emotional path. And so going to Atlanta, experiencing that first semester of college away from home, made me realize how valuable it was for us to be apart. And then when I came back to Tallahassee and I lived with you for a couple months before I got my own place, that showed me the value of us being together. And so that experience gave me two different perspectives, and allowed me to really kind of find the good or find the positive in each type of dynamic that we had.
So what's one thing that, couple of questions. What's one thing that you would change you would tell your younger self, or someone who is not yet where you are in the level of the relationship that we have now? What's one piece of advice that you would give them?
That's a good question. I would tell myself to extend more grace,
Mm-hmm.
extend more grace to myself, and extend more grace to you. Because again, I was seeing a lot of my experiences from my lens and not what you may have been going through as a mother who had to move her child around, or as a wife who lost her husband,
Mm-hmm.
or
Mm-hmm.
trying to reconfigure your career. And so I would tell my younger self to extend grace to you, and also to extend grace to myself, because I was dealing with a lot, and I just would kind of stuff it down and not deal with it. But giving myself more grace and extending myself the opportunity to actually feel those things and deal
Mm-hmm.
with them head on, I think would have brought us closer faster.
Yeah, and that's really good. I'm a big proponent of grace, but I had to learn that, right? And it's really interesting because I had to learn to extend grace to myself before I became really good at extending grace to other people, because I would give certain parts of me, but certain parts of me were in reserve. And I had to become a little bit more in tune, with myself, and be a little kinder, right? I think I like the fact that you're talking about some of the emotional pieces, right? Emotionally, as a mother daughter, or in our relationship, I don't think that I thought about emotions like that. As a parent, I thought about, the things that I had to do, um, how we were going to get from point A to point B, building a good life for us. And the emotional piece was just, okay, this is what we do. Let's just roll. We got to go. We got to go. And I don't think that it started to shift and change until I began to realize that working solely without looking at emotions was kind of weird and detrimental, right? Um, And so I think that's one of the things that I would say, to a mother daughter who are trying to figure things out. Talk about the feelings, right? Talk about, and be willing to listen to the feelings. Now we have really candid conversations. We talk about those feelings, and we discuss a lot, right? But we didn't get there until, we had to begin to really deal with the emotional pieces that had, almost kind of severed our ability to have a friendship. I think that it's a really great, perspective. And for me, it was key, you know, to know that what I said, how I said it, what I did, and how I did it had an impact on you. I wasn't just doing it because you happened to be my daughter, or you didn't have to accept it because you just happened to be my daughter. I didn't have to just give you, right, stuff to force upon you. That you were an actual human being with, decisions and choices and input. And when I began to realize, wait a minute, um, she she's articulate, and if you ask her a question, she'll probably give you an answer. Now you got to position yourself to accept the answer, like, not get the answer that you think you want, but what if she says something different, and how will you handle that? And I think that doing those things and being open to that started to make that shift. um, Another question is, if you could change one thing, and of course, the biggest thing, of course, I know would be your dad, but aside from that, If you could change one thing, what would that be?
In life,
Yeah, in life, in our relationship, what would you
um,
what would you have done different? Change, better.
I would have changed our our movement. I would have loved to um, be in one place from elementary to high school and be able to say that I've been friends with my same friends since we were in kindergarten, and we graduated elementary and we graduated middle school and we graduated high school and we're going to college together. Just to be able to kind of have that stability,
Mm-hmm.
and that constant connection
Mm-hmm.
to the
Mm-hmm.
same people. I'm so grateful for the fact that we did move around, because I have friends all over the country and friends that I'm very close to, that live all over. But I would have loved the experience of being stationary and being stable in one place and being able to kind of nurture that sense of community, I guess.
That's interesting because I grew up like that. Like we all went to elementary school, we all went to middle school, we literally all went to high school, and depending on the side of town you was on, we had two high schools. And all of us went to John Ehret, and everybody else on the other side went to West Jeff. It was, what we did. And I have, select friends from those times, but I didn't see I didn't think about it that way because I I was in the military and I had trained myself, right, to be in the military. And from that point to this one, in the military you move every 2 to 3 years. So in my head, when I began to, get into my career, I happened to get in a career where I was in leadership and training and I would be mobile. Um, when I went to racetrack, it was understood, you know, that when you go into training, you go into operations, you'll be expected to move every 3 years. So I never saw it that to me it was like an adventure because I had had that stability, right, or that sameness. Um,
But I think a lot of who you, not a lot, but some of a significant part of who you are is because you were in the military. A lot of the way that you approach things, a lot of the way that you are in your career, kind of how you assert yourself in the workplace, um, that comes from your military background. And I think there are a lot of positives about you that come from the fact that you were in the military. Um, One of them being kind of like, I'm adventurous. I'm willing to try new things and move to new places and explore. And I think I'm a lot like that in a way. I just, in my teenage experience, in
mm-hmm,
my teenage mind,
mm-hmm,
that wasn't ideal. But
right.
even as an adult now, I tell people all the time, like, if I didn't have to consider my daughter's, well, if I didn't take my experiences about moving around and consider that for my own daughter, I would live somewhere new every 2 years, because I love to travel. I love to explore. I love to like do things on my own and just adventure. So I think that a lot of what you do is because of your military experience.
And I think it was, and I agree, it was the military, but it was also a little bit of pre-military because when I moved to Pennsylvania, your dad was from Chicago, so we was in Pennsylvania, and then we went to Maryland, and then we went to D.C. They were like a hop, skip, and a jump from each other, but nevertheless, and it wasn't every 2 years. It was just we just did that, and I think I picked up a little bit of that from him because he was kind of adventurous, right?
A little nomad.
Yeah, yeah, he was a little adventurous, um, and then the military just kind of topped it off. So I agree that that part came from it, and I think the thing that the other piece that stuck out was the regimen, right, of the military helped and hindered. helped in the fact that it was regimen. It was processes and things that needed to be done and blah, blah, blah. And I think hindered because it was regimented. You know what I mean? And when I began to back off of that, um, then I had to really like embrace a softer side. And I think the military worked because um, I had been hard. I had been through that hard stuff. Like, we was working at VQ, we was serving and giving, in our roles, but no one was taking advantage of anything, right? And I think I brought that into our relationship. And as the years have gone on, we've been able to mold it, right, for our good. And I really appreciate the fact that now um, the woman that you have become, right? I hear pieces of me, and of course, people don't know your dad. So when they say, "Oh, she's so smart," but when I hear you, in your career, and I hear you uh, doing what you do so well, I see the mixture, because he was sharp. He was sharp as a tack. He was highly intelligent, right? But of course, no one sees that part because he's not here. So you're a good mixture, right, of the both of us, and I'm proud of that, and I know he would be proud of that. So, what do you see as our strongest? What do you see as our strength collectively, you and I?
I think our ability to adapt. Um, it is interesting to me to observe some of my other friends' relationships with their mom, because some of them are very like predictable, or like I know the way that my friend's mom is going to respond to her if she does this specific thing. Or if she asks her mom a specific question, I can kind of get a sense of how her mom is going to respond, based on what I've seen of their relationship. Now, not to say that I know, my friends and their mom's relationships in and out. But I think you and I have a way of, um, we have a way of adapting to the point of discussion or the setting or the people we may be around, and it's like unspoken.
I was just going to say it's unspoken.
Yeah, and so we just kind of like we kind of understand each other, based on again the topic of discussion or wherever we are, and I think that that's special because not every mom and daughter have that connection, and I think that it gives us I don't know, it just kind of boosts the I don't know the word I'm looking for, but it boosts the connection. It makes the connection stronger because you and I are able to adapt in a way that's so similar without speaking.
Right. I agree. And the reason I'm grinning is I think about uh, just so happens my friends' daughters are your friends, right? And when we get together, when we mother and daughtering, um, when you were talking, I thought about Pam and Coriel. Pam and Coriel, right? Hilarious together, and
And you know
they
they're going to be hilarious
and
together because they're always like that.
always gonna be hilarious together. But Pam can say something, and the whole thing will change. She'll realize, oh wait a minute, this is my mom, right? And I think that because that was kind of the benchmark that I held my desire to really have a friendship with you. It was Pam and her relationship with her daughter Coriel, and I see us as that now, right? But again, in our own way, um, coming into your own, having a daughter, right? My sweet girl, all right. I believe that the lessons that I learned from our relationship, I am being very conscious of that as we begin to, you being primary, of course, you and her dad, have a and develop a relationship with Soraya. I see that my ability to, not just from a grandmother, because they say grandmothers do certain things and I get that. But I mean, you, now I'm beginning to see how to handle even better you as a mother with a child. So not just my daughter and my friend, but that temperance of word, that temperance of, um, as Tab would say, minding my business, right? Do you feel that that is something that is happening the way that you want it to happen? And as we begin to wrap up, for others who are experiencing that, you have your mom, you have yourself, and then you have a child. One, do you feel that we are getting to a point where you could see that? And two, what would you say to someone who maybe not be there yet, who's not there yet?
I do think that you provide a certain level of support um, in my experience as a mom, because you're kind of like my go-to for what I'm dealing with XYZ. Who should I go to? My mom, naturally. I don't have hardly any mom friends, and so you provide a very strong sense of support for the way that I mother, along with my experiences as a child, because I want to duplicate or replicate the things that I think were great experiences in my childhood. And then I want to kind of avoid the
Correct.
things
Yeah.
that I feel like weren't necessarily good experiences for me. So that my daughter has, a more, a more
Balance?
yeah, that's a good word, a more balanced experience with me. And we're able to achieve a certain level of relationship before she's in her 20s.
Correct.
And so that's kind of where I feel like you stand in my experience as a mom. For those who may not be there yet, I think that it is very important to accept the love and the help and the support that's being offered. I'm very independent. I'm an only child, and
Very.
I can do anything that I want to do by myself. And if I can't do it by myself, I will try my damnedest to figure out how I can do it by myself before I ask somebody for help. And that's a good thing in some ways. But
some.
in a lot of ways, it's not, because it blocks my support circle sometimes. It blocks people's willingness to offer me help, because if I've offered you help 16 times and you told me no 16 times, why am I going to offer it the 17th?
Correct.
And so learning to accept help and support and love and wisdom from older women. They may not necessarily have to be your mom.
Correct.
But older women, aunts, mentors, church members, whomever it may be, I think helps your experience as a mom, whether you're a new mom or you got 10 kids.
And I would add to that, that's really great. I would add to that is the supporters, us, the moms of the world, who are in the circle with the young ladies that you're talking to, of accepting support and asking for help. I would say to the supporters, walk lightly. Offer help. But sometimes, if help is not asked of you, that may not be your time to contribute. Honor your opinion, but respect the opinion of the person, of the daughter that you're giving it to. And accept the fact that it is an offering. It is not a dictatorship. Like it's based off of wisdom, and it's based off of, our own life experiences that we are given to you. But we have to accept the fact that you don't have to do as we say. You don't have to take the advice verbatim. You can twist it and mold it, right? And make it your own. And I think that you're doing a wonderful job. Of course, I'm very proud of you. I'm very proud of you as a person. Very proud of you as my daughter. You happen to be awful cute too.
Thank you, mommy.
And I think that we're on our way. So I want to thank you for joining the conversation, for being candid and sharing.
Thank you for having me.
You're welcome. Thank you all for joining Power Conversations and Connections all across social media. Subscribe, like SR Appleton. I'm sorry, I'm going back to my AC days. Susan R. Appleton at Power Conversations. Thank you. See you next time. Y'all be good.